or difficulties do you find as a psychologist too?
Yeah, I think certainly in Britain, the word psychology is, I always describe it as a heavily loaded or heavily burdened word. By that I mean that people in Britain tend to perceive psychology as, oh, there's something wrong with me. Why do I need to see a psychologist? There's something wrong with me. And so there can be some resistance from both players and coaches. But we in psychology are becoming much better now at educating the player and coach and helping them understand that it's not that there's something wrong, it's often about just helping them be the best that they can be. So as a player, it's not that you're mentally weak or you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it is that case, and sometimes you're trying to help them become mentally tougher. But often it's about helping a very good player become even better. Mm. And as a coach, you're trying to say to the coach, technically, tactically, that's where you're very efficient. But what underpins tactical execution and effective technique is the psychology, is to think effectively, to be able to play with confidence. For example, if a player wants to execute his technique under pressure, he needs to be able to perform confidently, he needs to be able to perform with focus. So psychology, to me, underpins technique, physicality.
With teams or individually, what do you prefer?
I'm passionate about both. I love both. I started mainly working with individuals, but over the last 10 years that I've worked in football, I've been fortunate to work with teams, and I think both are equally rewarding, both are equally complex and challenging, but both is my passion.
It is very common to hear about sports coaching, not sports psychology. So what's the main difference between both sports psychologists and sports coaching?
Look, I think that sports coaching involves the four main components of performance and development, which is technique, tactics, mental psychology, and physicality. So as a coach, you need to have a broad knowledge of all four areas. You're not necessarily an expert in all four, you have a good knowledge of all four. Whereas obviously as a sports psychologist, you have your primary knowledge is in the mental side, the psychology side. Absolutely, sports coaches do psychology within their role, but they're not psychologists as such.
A football team, and then they suffer a defeat. How can you work with players after the match? How can you?
Well, when you've lost, one of the things that tends to happen in football is when a team loses, naturally the individuals want to win, and so it impacts them emotionally. They can feel down. Where footballers are quite guilty is that when they win, they're very up. When they lose, they're very down. And I try to help them stay on what we say in Britain, an even keel. We try to help them stay a bit more even emotionally. What I do with footballers is I help the individuals or the team analyse the game they've just had. So, for example, I want them to answer two questions. What went well? Even if they've lost, what went well in the game, so they can pick out the strengths, the things that went well. The second question is what needs to go better next time. So rather than saying, well, what went wrong or what was weak, what needs to go better next time? What do we need to introduce next time? So I want them to think objectively, logically about the game rather than too emotionally. Once they've done that analysis, once they've learnt from, say, the loss, the defeat, then they start to look forward. Then if they've played on Saturday, they've lost, I want them to think on a Sunday, ask those two questions, and on a Monday into training, start focusing on the next weekend.
I think it's going to be good when children start to play, to do sports,
yes.
to start with the psychologist from the base, from the grassroots. I think is it important for children to start with to be in contact with people, professionals like you?
Right. I think it's about taking an intelligent approach. I think that I like to start working with young footballers from about the age of 12. I think before the age of 12, the coaches need to have a good knowledge of psychology. I think it's very extreme for a sports psychologist to see somebody at 8 or 9 years old. I think the coaches, that's where they really are. It's very important for them to have a good knowledge of psychology. I think from the age of 12, yes, you still want the coaches to have a good knowledge of psychology, but I think then a sports psychologist can be introduced to them in a very soft, small way, and as they get older, the sports psychologist does more and more.
Also, it's important. Parents are very important, because it's a very important part of the children's when they start sports, because they can make some influence. I think David also works with the parents more than children. Parents, because they are more important to the career of the children. No?
Absolutely. Parents are with their children every single day, so they have a huge impact on a child's development in football and mindset. When I've worked with clubs in the past, I have worked closely with parents. I've delivered presentations to parents and spoken to them individually to teach them the best way to help rather than hinder their child's football development. I think a lot of football coaches say, I don't want the parent involved, but I think the football coach needs to accept the parent is going to be involved no matter what, so it's very important to educate the parent to be a good sports parent.